Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. I'm Mr. Pelican. I'm running for mayor of Abbotsford, and under my command and the people that I bring in, we are going to remove the Abbotsford Private Police. And why? We're going to put the RCMP in here. Today, I've been asked of why I do so many podcasts and so many people didn't, and why I attack Mike DeYoung Edfast. I'm going to take you on a little journey, and I want you to stand by and listen very closely. This is BC Transit Workyard, and it was on Riverside. Henry Braun saw a chance to move it off of Riverside, freeing up the land from A2 to I2 and get multi-millions of dollars in tilt-up warehouses, using Pam, the Minister of Ag, to rush and fast-track the job under a proposal that he helped get in when she was running for the NDP. This job's money was lobbied by Ed Fast off of Stephen Harper, the federal MP of the Conservatives. It also was lobbied by Mike jong, the sitting MLA under Christy Clark's Liberals at the provincial level. When this job had Henry Braun as the commander-in-chief as mayor with his son in front of him, and he struck the council that he had called Abbotsford First, Ross Siemens and them in his back pocket and awarded them perks, he knew he could control them and shut their mouths. When this job started for development here in Abbotsford, Henry stood to gain a lift by bringing this next to his property. He said, in conflict of interest, I got to step off because I can stand. I'm in conflict, and you could go back in the city archives. But the city lawyer told Abbotsford residents he also has to remove his son because he stands to gain his son, Darren Braun's approving officer, and doing all the dirty work for his dad. And his dad tried to fool Abbotsford by putting Ross Siemens in there and figuring I'm out. And he got Ross to continue the dirty deal. When this job commenced its construction, it caused damage and shaking on homes in the back here through the middle of the winter, because under a proposal, if the government sees there's a trouble, they'll pay the money off the table, and Justin Trudeau would probably pull that, and so would John Horgan. When this job ran into trouble, Abbotsford residents went to the city to file a written complaint to speak at City Council. Henry and Nancy Friesen did everything they could to stop him from the city auditorium so it wouldn't be dialogued on open mic, or the other councils wouldn't. When Councillor Mogale found out that Henry was blocking city councils and he's not allowed to do it under proposal, it was because then you would have federal investigations. Abbotsford residents and me storm-bombed the city, and Henry didn't know what to do. He shit his pants. Henry Braun ran off stage. When he ran off stage, he used his cellular phone to phone an off-duty police officer called Keelan Olenoff and get threats taken out because he didn't want investigation or criminal investigation that he's using the city chair to lobby jobs for him, with his son, and to his partners. So Henry Braun went into organized crime, and because he sat on the city mayor's seat, he sat also on the police board, and he controlled them. But Henry's son opened the door till there was no returns. When the threats started coming in left, right, and center by Henry Braun and his little shithole establishment, Abbotsford residents went to this man, Michael DeYoung, sent by the RCMP, because Mike knew better. Mike, rather than saying, let's put the job on hold, let's find out why Henry's not sending no officials up there, no investigations, no reports being done, because Mike knew to control paperwork buries you. He was a former prosecutor. And no visitations after homeowners begged and kicked through the doors of the city, and you can see that. Abbotsford homeowners also went to the shit kicker himself, Ed Fast, who lobbied that money, and Ed Fast tried to bribe the homeowners by saying, I can't do much, but I need to know what your lawyers are doing against the city, so he could tell Henry Braun. Simon Gibson, who was the sitting MLA in Mission, who was under Mike's thumb, went to bat to clean it. I believe, in my opinion, Mike told Simon, I go down, you go down too, you shitbox. So it went out on threats. But Darren Braun was Henry's son and leaked what his dad was doing, how dad controlled his Abbotsford First, called city councillors, which Ross Siemens was on. When Henry upped the threats till there was no return, using Abbotsford police as muscle to shut your mouth so he could do it, homeowners suffered massive damage. In the construction world where I grew up, I know that you have to send engineers out, you have to do field reports, you have to seize the job, you have to have the officials come. Henry snapped them all. There was never anyone committed. Then he strapped it all from the city so they couldn't get out. When Councillor Mogill found out, that's why he ran. Where there was smoke, there was fire. But Henry went across the boundaries of, never mind just originating himself. He had these two shit kickers that knew that he was doing it. Mike lobbied this money. Eric Nivel, who's Mike's financial agent, sat in our homes drinking beer at the devastation that Henry did and Mike did. And he knew Mike lobbied this job and Mike was covering to clean for Henry, and now he's Mike's financial agent. I mean, take me out and smash my heads against the rock. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense at all. I wonder how much Eric Nivel had to swallow or was paid to do this one. Eric Nivel knew Mike was responsible. Mike DeYoung ran twice for the Liberal nomination leadership, and he didn't make it. He didn't make it. Mike DeYoung figured crossing over to the Federal Conservatives to increase his portfolio. Then he will cross back over, if he doesn't get this run because of all his cheating, to build his portfolio. He'll go to the new party that the old Liberals created, called the BC Centre Right or something they created, because Kevin Falcon wouldn't let Mike have the leadership control. But this job is what set the spark. When I knew Henry was muscling and his son, I ran for mayor. In my wildest dreams, working with many developers and many people in political rings and everything, I know there's supposed to be a voice for the residents. Ed Fast wasn't. That meant Ed was in over his head with Henry Brown lobbying jobs, because Ed knew Henry's criminal acts should have been called out, his abuse of the city chair and the abuse of city council and the abuse of the Abbotsford newspaper. I could shadow it all. Henry knew it was out of control. He knew Ed couldn't control it no more because of his loudmouth son, Toll. Henry was in dire straits, so he figured, I'm untouchable, and he started orchestrating threats. Henry went to the city chair to originate his south, take advantage of the community plan, and then rog fund. With Darren Brown's hand, I saw all the stuff he was doing through the elections to Bruce Banman. I saw what he did to Mogill with the task force to block Mogill, and I saw Ed Fast stood by. That meant Ed Fast and Mike DeYoung were very, 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 very close buddies. When Henry goes, they stand to go. Mike DeYoung broke all the laws and the criminal code, and he covered up organized crime for his buddy Henry Brown. That is only one reason you do that. Because under job sites, what I work on, when something takes place, the superintendent, project manager stop it, and officials climb up your asshole like they never been, and that you could see from history at WCB. Henry struck everybody from the city. Engineers, reports, of everything. You're not talking one time did the homeowners go. They went hundreds of times, and Henry blocked them at the auditorium. When Henry knew he couldn't clean it no more after his hit and run to end my life, and Mike Sears fled, Henry figured he'd load Ross Siemens, the man that sat in the chair with his son in front of him and did the scam that was responsible for it all. And Ross worked at his gas station while Dave Sadu, Greg Toes, and them rigged the Chamber of Commerce to load him. I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I stand to be Abbotsford's voice. And why I do that is because I want to tell you this. Thanks to the Mission RCMP men and women that saw through this scam, knew right away, right out the get-go that this ain't a conspiracy. They knew what Henry was doing and Mike. The RCMP sent us to Mike DeYoung of why city officials were not inspecting, creating reports, and coming out to them damages on houses. Why? That job would get red flagged. Trudeau would pull the money and everything back, and it would open up books. But Henry just couldn't stop there, cut his ties and go. He went into threats. He told Ed and Mike, you're in too far and you're already tied up. Last night at the Chamber of Commerce debate, let me tell you about Mike DeYoung, Vicky Hopes. Let me tell you, you could see what Rick Rakes, the former pro editor, did to Tyler Olson, to everybody. When Darren opened that door, ladies and gentlemen, I had the best men and women that represent Canada. Their compassion, their love, their caring was the RCMP mission, and I can't tell you how grateful I am and Abbotsford residents are, and old shitbox is cheating left, right, and center. Ed flip-flopped out of the Conservatives, smashed down, no party for Ed, nothing. He flipped his chair over in Ottawa and he was running. He knew he needs to load Mike DeYoung to stop criminal investigations and halt the RCMP out of here. There was a candidate that ran for the federal Conservatives and his name was Steve Schaefer. I believed many other people that worked with him knew that he should have been the front and center runner and he should have been forward now as your MP and nominated. Ed Fast was jacking him over, so was Mike DeYoung, so was Sir James Barlow and everybody, because they were trying to load Mike DeYoung. They were jacking that Steve Schaefer left, right, and center. They didn't see Suk Mangel coming in. They thought, oh, he's a nobody. The big boys are all tied to Steve Schaefer. And Suk Mangel pulled the impossible and caught him while they were all sleeping in the nomination. Then came the scandals on the scandals. Mike said the EDA endorsed him. No, EDA endorsed him because they were behind Steve Schaefer, a majority of them. Ed Fast then pulled his stuff and they went after this poor candidate that Pierre Poilievre made clear. If you're a grassroots Conservative, you'll vote Conservatives no matter what Ed Fast is doing. This is about money and it was an organized crime. I've never seen, and Abbotsford residents will tell you, they've never seen former mayors, MPs, and everything get behind old Mikey. Mikey threw a party at Bell Road at the height of the coronavirus where people were going to jail and everything else. Vicky Hopes held the scandals. Last night, at the sports center, that's where it would all begin, where Sandy Blue said I grabbed her on their whipper-whapper to help Ross Siemens. A scam on a scam on a scam. It wasn't a democracy. It wasn't that you could do better for Abbotsford. It was what the geezers were dying to get. Them geezers destroyed a lot of lives. I saw what they did to Marcus Delvis. I saw what they did to Dave Sadu, and I saw what they done through the whole thing, Barty Sadu and everybody. People put their name forward and said I was going to run them. Geezer used them where they could enrichinate themselves. We build prisons, and we got to make sure that prisons even put assholes like Mike DeYoung in jail. Mike DeYoung now knows he's got to cheat. Henry controlled the whole city, and you could see it of what he did. And thanks to the RC and Abbotsford police, they're even telling me Mike's signs were all illegal during here this Easter holiday, so he could get all the advertising. And you know what bylaw did, Magna did on Mackenzie Bog and the farms, and they were controlling the city. Henry thought that Abbotsford City was his company and he was going to run it. Henry stood in to gain millions of dollars when he first came mayor. He wanted to bring SkyTrain through because he owned P&R, his son told me, and he was going to get millions of dollars lobbying these jobs. These were not about Abbotsford. Henry stood to gain at all times, but he had two politicians that used their chairs to cover up organized crime and neglect on Abbotsford residents. These homeowners, along with me, worked all their lives to build a place for your family, and some of them are in retirement, and some of them have young kids. Your mayor is supposed to make sure that negligence don't happen and by the contractor. Everybody knew from Aquilini's Mike Dakota on and Stuart Olson and MPs and mayors across this great country we live in, that right now, that shitbox Henry Brown should have went after the developer here and said, you're on the hook till you fix that job stopped. They couldn't. The only reason you can't do that and call it out is because you took money through the back doors, because nobody stands to cover up such a negligence of that. Henry, even when his followers putting the Abbotsford newspaper on board with the city so he could get Vicky Hopes and the Abbotsford News under his thumb to control what took place. Last night at the Sports Centre is where the debate took place to load Mike de Jong, and you could see it. Ed Fast sat against the wall. He looked like a duck that'd been shot out of the sky, landed in the river, and they pulled him from the gutter. Drained, nowhere to go. Looked staring at me, nowhere to go, knowing the walls are caving in, no party threw him an endorsement, nothing. Turning his party upside down, they know Ed's running for his life. Poor Mike. Mike's used the financial institutions. He used the Fraser Valley Indo Association to endorse him, which is a non-profit. Under the rules, they're not allowed to have that endorsement. And you saw this. They've subdued the city councillor. You saw Ross Siemens and the endangerment. If this young guy gets in this as the MP, he's going to strap shit kick Ross Siemens, and Abbotsford will help him do it. Shit kick him right to the curb on everything. Henry was after the money and everything. But Henry broke the law, ladies and gentlemen. You can see now why I'm a free man and I don't tell you the RCMP or the Abbotsford police are smashing my camera and threatening me. They distanced themselves from Henry. And they distanced themselves due to my podcast saying the RCMP got to take Abbotsford. They should have held a professional distance and they should have enforced the law. They didn't. This is what sent the spark off in Abbotsford. Negligence, racketeering, scams, and fraud. Then Henry loaded and scammed with diverse, loading Ross Siemens' signs everywhere and everything. We got to make it clear. The Pierre Poilievre said there is only one. Stephen Harper said there's only one guy on that list with no hesitation. It's Pierre Poilievre. What Pierre Poilievre said, don't split the votes. Create that blue wave and get behind it. Ed Fast undermined his party. Ed Fast turned on Abbotsford. Ed Fast threw his life down the drain for his best shithole friend that pulled him and used him and scammed and was in organized crime, Henry Braun. And this is what they were doing. But Eric Nivel was against Henry Braun. And now he's told to swallow, and everybody's laughing at Nivel swallow as Henry Braun comes beside Mike de Jong. Skelly's the man what was running in the nomination against Steve Schaefer. He was running. And he runs the hot dog stand at Canadian Tire. Made it clear to us and to everybody that was there and people off the EDA. I'm only running in this nomination run to stop Mike de Jong. That was his words. Abbotsford residents and Canadian Tire called me. Sorry, I gotta laugh a little bit here. Canadian Tire called me and said, what side of shit does this guy eat his burger? Now he goes and endorsed Mike de Jong. Maybe Mike de Jong put him there, like Dave Sadu and them had them there when they had Troy Gasper and they blocked me. Last night's Chamber of Commerce, the Ben, sent you something. It's supposed to be in front of the city auditorium, ladies and gentlemen. It wasn't. You know why it wasn't? Ed can't pack that building. Henry can't fraud Abbotsford. So they did it at the Sports Centre. But Suk Mangale's team and Abbotsford's Mennonites and Abbotsford Dutch were on South Fraser Highway. They were over on the bridge. They were over out on George Ferguson, holding up signs, tooting horns and rallying because they want a candidate that is your MP and they can walk in and he's not under the establishment's voice, and they call this out. This was on families. This is how I knew the RCMP emissions heart would come out. But no one would ever have guessed this. We saw David Eby leave. We saw Henry Brown try to shit kick the hell out of Trudeau, and it was all for more money. But this man was an elected official, Mike de Jong. He was an elected official as an MLA. He was a former prosecutor and he knew the law. And he covered it up and cleaned it. And he lobbied this money in here. And Mike never once, as many times and hundreds of times of visitations to his door, did he ever say to Henry Brown, why did you strap investigations, paperwork, and leave them residents all by themselves? Henry believed, through Ed Fast shutting his mouth and Mike de Jong shutting his mouth, and the newspaper was already up his ass so far you couldn't believe it. This means that we need the RCMP. And people like Vicky Hopes have to understand that this was an attack on Abbotsford families, It was organized crime, and it also was rigging the election, and you could see why she removed her face out of the newspaper, and she figures if she can flash Mike de Jong around and criticize this other candidate. She knew what took place. She was there. I'm a man about the principles and what the RCMP did, what Bill Vander Zalm did, and great people did to come along all this way to make sure this was on the world stage. So shithole people like Vicky Hopes and Ken that own a shithole rag newspaper that covered up organized crime can spend their time in jail and have everything that they thought they were getting from Henry stripped from them. That is why I want the RCMP. That is why the RCMP need to come here. Abbotsford Police, I can tell you, treat me with great respect now. It's a little too late, boys. The law is clear. Henry got in that car and left the city and came right at me to end my life. It was all to load raw Siemens to steal them jobs, and he was in organized crime. I know, deep in my heart, with Abbotsford residents, the RCMP don't look away from nobody, no matter what position you are in, mayor, council, lawyers or not. Henry loaded the establishment, and you could see him ring now, like Darren Braun said in the beginning. You could see him, all of them. And nowhere in history have you seen former losers, absolutely losers. George Perry caused your water taxes, like Darren Braun said, to be on par of you. George Perry couldn't get the water pipeline built. Ed Fast never lobbied and got the money for the flood victims. Never went out and visited them flood victims Henry was threatening. Knew Henry strapped the Dyke Committee, took it away. He took Open Mike away. Mike de Jong never got the highway built. Mike de Jong took out the roundy rounds. Mike de Jong caused the carbon tax. It just goes on about Mike de Jong. These men were never about Abbotsford. When Steve Schaefer came and ran, everybody knew he was the guy that was going to lead Abbotsford, and a lot of people went behind him. The establishment jacked him, and when they jacked that poor man, they left themselves open, and in came Superman Gill. Then they tried to scam him out of there. Abbotsford needs a cleanup, and it needs the federal Conservatives to lock hold and bring the RCMP in, and with help of Abbotsford residents. I could tell Ron Funk on the verse right now. All the jobs Henry lobbied to his partner, the CEO Ron Funk, Darren Brown showed me, you're going to lose them. So you better stop building and you better quit. It was organized crime. All the jobs that were fast-tracked in Cooper's Farm and everything will go under it. Ed is completely out of that. But that auditorium was not sent last night a message. They had a few at the sports center. And Superman Gill, the Conservative candidate, avoided the establishment tremendously because he's your voice for your Conservatives. And Pierre Poilievre made it clear. Don't split the vote. Create the blue wave, Abbotsford. This is Ed Fast. And I will tell you as Commander-in-Chief, the first thing I will do is bring the RCMP in here, and this will never take place again to a family, and no shit kicker like Henry Brown will walk free. I'm adamant. Even in their retirement and as they flee, guys like Mike de Jong took an oath. He had a city chair and he had a duty and he violated it. Then he figured, now I'm going to go cheat because it's going to give me protection if I can get in here. When a man stands on the world stage as large as I did, and big balls here, and Henry Brown and Ed Fast don't hit you with the defamation of character and the slander lawsuit and everything else, the RCMP knew right now Darren Brown was telling the truth. This is why when somebody gets in an accident with ICBC deals with it, and you're looked after. This shit was done in fraud. And Henry was freeing up Riverside. Henry had his son in front of him. He had the majority of council in his house. Henry had Ed Fast up his backside and Mike de Jong. There's only one choice for Mike de Jong now to do when this is all done. To go over and join the new party that Kevin Falcon wouldn't let him hold the old BC Liberals or the BC United. But Eric Nivel, the financial agent, sat in our house, knowing that this was wrong because he's got his small family. He ran against Henry Brown and what Henry did to this city. Abbotsford residents respected Eric Nivel to stand up. But Eric Nivel knew this man lobbied the money, this man looked away, this man covered up criminal charges, this man covered up a hit and run, this man covered it all. And I will tell Eric Nivel, Abbotsford residents and me think you're a piece of shit for what you have done. And there had to be a reward after all your heart-passing stories in our houses to look away. Because I tell you, no one will ever buy me when they do this stuff to families. That is why I stood true to Abbotsford and stood true with the best. Henry Brown tried to end my life. Henry Brown used the city to enrich himself and his friends. Henry Brown used Ed Fast and Mike DeYoung, and they thought that plan was a perfect plan, just like organized crime and gangs. But Henry Brown had a little army called the Abbotsford Police. And when Darren Brown showed me, you swipe that Abbotsford Police down on its bloody face and shove it in a ditch. Henry Brown's helpless, and so is his political players. This is what Pierre Polly had found out, what probably Ed and Mike were doing, and stripped Mike DeYoung. So Mike DeYoung's in full-blown out cheating, Vicky Hopes, and this ain't helping him, Vicky Hopes. In today's newspaper, a little article, Henry Brown endorsed Mike DeYoung. Henry Brown caused the flood of Abbotsford, taking the Dyke and Ditch Committee away. The problem is, Vicky Hopes, even people like you are not smart enough from the great investigators and criminal investigators that work in the RCMP, and that's why I went to them, and by shit, they knew right away that Ed Fast should have called out Henry's son, Henry's collaborating, Henry's racketeering, and this job site, and the harm, and the criminal negligence, and his hit and run. And they knew Mike DeYoung did it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm live. This is what spent the spark, and not a one of them came to Abbotsford residents to look at them homes. They figured they could jack the residents would be stuck to get a lawyer, spend millions and millions of dollars, and try to defend it. But great lawyers came forward to help Abbotsford residents because their hearts went out. And Abbotsford residents couldn't thank them enough. That is what the city officials were supposed to do, and they didn't do it. Instead, they threatened. Henry Brown was enriching himself, and he was using his son to do it all. Then he used his two political players that I'm above the law, and I don't go to jail. Gang members all go to jail. I'm live, ladies and gentlemen, right here on the job site that sent the spark across Abbotsford.